Welcome back. In 2003, our next guest released her film, The Corporation, about the rising dominance of corporations around the world. It made international waves and even caused some corporate executives to change their approach to business. Now she's back with a follow up, The New Corporation, the unfortunately necessary sequel. Here to tell us all about it is director Jennifer Abbott. Jennifer, we're so excited to talk to you today. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So Jennifer, you made quite a stir when this film, the first film, was released in 2003. You labeled corporations basically as institutional psychopaths. Um, you were actually hesitant to make a sequel at first. What exactly was it that changed your mind?
The defining moment really was when Donald Trump was elected. It's not as if everything changed at precisely that moment. We really see Donald Trump as a symptom of 40 years of neoliberalism as opposed to a cause. But rather, it was at that moment the veil came down. There was no longer even the pretense of independence between corporations and governments. There they were rigging the system in full view and having the audacity to do so. So it was at that
Yes.
moment that I thought, okay, yeah, it's time. It's time. We have more things to say. It's definitely time to make the sequel.
So, what distinguishes sort of the new corporate movement that we're seeing now from the ones of the past?
Around 2008, 2009, 2010, my co-director on this film, Joel Bakken, and the writer as well, really identified that corporations were changing their messaging. And they realized that they were being seen as largely unfavorably, and rightly so. So, what you see is a shift of messaging. And it's actually sort of a two-tiered, two-faceted message. On the one hand, there are friends, let's rely on them to solve problems. On the other hand, a demonization of government. Government is inefficient. We can do it better. So I think, got this message, those of us that bought it, that really corporations in many instances can substitute for government. And so it's not as if the corporation itself has changed, but rather the messaging changed. And that's what we call the new corporation.
Well, yeah, you mentioned government and you explore how corporations are, almost rivaling governments in terms of power and influence. So does the
Mhm.
corporation or the new corporation have kind of more reign now, more free reign than ever?
Well, of course, one can't make this generalization in all instances, but I would say yes, in many ways. Let's just take the high tech sector. The outsized power of high tech really cannot be overstated. And I think most of us would see that all the time. And I think there's really two reasons for that. On the one hand, you had a government which did not have the will or the capacity to regulate high tech. And then on the other hand, you have the development of new technologies at such a fast pace that it's really difficult for governments to keep up. Really, high tech is, they're at the forefront of governing society, sadly. And obviously, I mean, it goes without mentioning, but let's mention it anyway. Nobody elected them, so it's profoundly
Yes,
anti-democratic.
Yeah.
excellent point. Now, your film was finished and locked, and then COVID-19 hit, and you made the decision to sort of revisit the film and incorporate the pandemic into the narrative. How has COVID-19 further exposed, I suppose, the dangers of corporate power?
Well, I think that anyone that's paying any attention can really see the disproportionate impacts of COVID-19. That's one issue. And the other one, though, that is that we felt really important to include in our film is a thread that I think is often ignored in dominant narratives around the pandemic. And that's, how is it that these new diseases are emerging? So Ebola, the first SARS, COVID, AIDS, they're all zoonotic diseases. That means that they originated in another animal and jumped from one species to our species, sometimes with an intermediary host. And why does that happen? It happens because of the destruction of the natural world and because of industrial agribusiness. And of course, there's a direct link between those two things and corporations and 21st century extractive capitalism. So the more we see habitats for other animals destroyed, the more we're going to see those animals pushed up closer to human civilization and thereby having this opportunity to develop and to jump species. We have a headline in the new corporation: halt the destruction of nature or face more pandemics. That's not a fanciful statement. That's not hyperbolic. That is just simply scientific truth.
Oh my gosh. The movie, of course, really examines how corporations are contributing to climate change, to human rights issues, to social inequities. And part of that is because they're prioritizing profit over everything else. But the problem is that corporations also have a legal responsibility or duty to maximize profits for their shareholders. So are we as consumers or participants in even the stock market, are we being naive to expect corporations to behave more ethically?
Yes, we are. Because as you point out, there's a legal imperative. If ever there's a conflict between doing good and doing well, as in making profits for shareholders, they're legally obliged to put the latter first, to put profits above the common good, above the earth, above any kind of goal that is, socially responsible. So again, that's just a legal fact. So we are being naive to think that they are going to prioritize social responsibility because that's not what they're designed to do.
Jennifer, your first film, The Corporation, was credited as one of the inspirations behind the Occupy Wall Street movement back in 2011. And while that movement got global coverage, it did little to affect like really concrete change. But still, what can we learn from that movement?
I think there really were two huge lessons that we learned from Occupy. One is that activists need to pair protest with gaining sovereignty. And today we're seeing the election of all kinds of progressives all over the world, and that's hugely hopeful. But the second thing I think that Occupy did, and Robert Weissman in our film points it out, is it it reframed how we conceptualize and speak about these vast inequities in society. It came up with this framing, the 99 versus the 1%. It's actually more likely the 99.9 versus the 0.01%, 0.1%. But it was a brilliant framing strategy and it really caught on. And I think most people really relate to it. And so I believe that was also one of the valuable messaging that came from that movement.
You say one of the biggest ways that we've been conned by corporations has been how we see our sense of agency. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
It's our view that really corporate culture has conned us into thinking of the human species in this very narrow way that ultimately is vacuous. And so we've kind of been the parallel that goes along with that is that we then think of ourselves as consumers. We have agency in terms of buying an electric car or changing our light bulbs, and nobody's saying not to do those things. But what we are saying is don't think that is where your power really, really lies. One of the messages of our films is, we need to reinvigorate citizens who engage with democracy, who engage with each other, and who act together to create system change. Because that's the only way we're going to ever make progress in what is, in effect, a David and Goliath struggle.
Yeah.
Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure.
The film is called The New Corporation, and you can stream it right now only on Crave. Go watch it, get activated, and we'll be right back.